President Donald Trump indicted on more than 30 counts related to business fraud for payments made to an adult film star. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office confirms the indictment that is still under seal. They say they've been in contact with Trump's attorney to coordinate his surrender. Mr. Trump will likely appear in court next week. The former president says he is completely innocent and is calling the indictment election interference. Joining us now to talk about it is former federal prosecutor, longtime friend of the stream, Renato Mariotti. Mr. Mariotti, thank you for joining us this morning.
Happy to be here.
First of all, what's next? What's really going to be this first step for the former president? And are you surprised? Are you surprised by the indictment?
Well, let's start with the surprise. I was surprised a couple weeks ago when news first broke that the Manhattan DA's office was considering this hush money charges, this hush money investigation was heating up. I was surprised then. I thought that this was a matter that had been put to bed and thought that, frankly, the indictment would first come of Trump. The first indictment would come out of maybe Fulton County, Georgia. So I was surprised, but obviously now this has been telegraphed for a couple weeks. Now, what the next step's going to be is I expect that Trump and his attorneys are negotiating with the Manhattan DA's office to discuss, the terms of his sort of surrender and an initial appearance in court, which would be what's called an arraignment, where the charges would be presented. He would be informed of the penalties. There would be a bond set and so on. I don't expect him to be in handcuffs or in an orange jumpsuit or anything like that. He'll walk in a business suit like most other white-collar defendants would, and he'll have his day in court.
So there are the naysayers out there, the non-believers that this was a legitimate process. Take me through the process in kind of a synopsis form. But here wasn't just a district attorney, right? This was a district attorney who brought together a group of citizens, presented a case, and then the citizens really, take me through this grand jury process in short form, if you will.
Sure. A grand jury is a group of people like us, ordinary folks who are selected randomly, generally based on the voter rules or something along those lines, to come in and serve. Unlike a jury that you have in a regular trial, they don't sit there and watch a trial unfold. There's no defense table. There's no defense attorneys. What the grand jury does is they meet regularly, and the prosecutors put in evidence. They call witnesses, maybe in this case Michael Cohen or Stormy Daniels or so, or people like that. And they'll hear that evidence, they'll look at documents, and then ultimately they'll be asked to vote whether or not there should be an indictment. There will be presented an indictment, and they will vote, and they need a kind of a supermajority of that grand jury in order to return an indictment. Now, I will just say, obviously, we don't know what the charges are, and so anybody who's skeptical about the process, what I would encourage everyone to do is to withhold judgment until we know more about what the charges are and what the evidence is in this case.
Supermajority in this case, you said supermajority, correct? Supermajority meaning like 60-40?
Yeah, there's usually a certain number of grand jurors. I don't recall off the top of my head what the number is for New York, but I had heard it recently, maybe like 17 or something along those lines. You have to have a certain number of grand jurors voting in favor in order to return an indictment.
And this falls under really state purview. You're a federal prosecutor, so this would be state law. And every district, every county basically is different. This is going to be a biggie. I can't even imagine how big it's going to be, right? This is like unprecedented, no playbook here.
Yeah, I think
how do you see this thing playing out? How do you see it playing out? Do you see them being, how do you seat a jury of 12 unbiased people? I guess we don't know, right? We're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's going to be very complicated, Brad. First of all, jury selection is going to be difficult. Can you imagine finding, 12 people who've never heard of Donald Trump? The reality is, the question for the jury, of course, is not whether they've not heard of Donald Trump or don't have opinions of him, but whether or not they can be fair. And so there's going to be a lot of questioning regarding a jury. Each of those prospective jurors are going to be questioned about their feelings, their inclinations, their biases relating to Trump. And it'll be a challenge. I think this whole process will be challenging because he's also a current presidential candidate. So, and he's, by the way, he's facing criminal investigations in other jurisdictions. I mentioned Fulton County earlier. He's got a couple federal criminal investigations. So, it's a very complicated situation that could really spiral for the former president if he ends up getting charged elsewhere. And I think, for any ordinary person, Brad, this is a life-changing experience being indicted. For my clients, it can be devastating to them when they are indicted. And so, for him, I can't imagine what he's going to go through doing that in the midst of a presidential campaign.
Yeah, but knowing Donald Trump, I mean, you can call him what you want. The guy seems to be pretty Teflon when it comes to things. I mean, for you and I, it would be life-changing. For him, it was probably just a Thursday. Who knows? He could fundraise more. And Ron DeSantis is now saying, of course, his competitor in the Republican primary saying they're not even, going to make him leave Florida. So there's extradition questions, so on and so forth. Renato, I'd like you to follow this with us, and we appreciate your expert insight. So thank you for that. Early on here, this is day one. 30 charges thrown at him. That's like throwing the kitchen sink. Usually when you throw 30 at him, you're hoping to get a plea to one that might be a misdemeanor. Is that how you see this kind of being played with the 30? That's what we're hearing, like 30 charges.
Yeah, so if it's over 30 counts, what it tells me is prosecutors are trying to load up on counts, partly for the reason you said, but also partly because it's hard for a jury to select not guilty 30-something times in a row. I mean, we've seen that here in Chicago, by the way. A lot of these public corruption cases, they'll take one bribery scheme and turn it into 30-something charges. Not because you couldn't charge it. You could charge the same bribery scheme in like 2 charges. But it is very hard for a jury to select not guilty over and over and over again. And sometimes what the jury doesn't realize is if they just find him guilty on one count, that destroys the guy's life, right? So for Trump, if he's a convicted felon, it's all over, right? I mean, that what the prosecutors are trying to accomplish, get a conviction, proceed to sentencing. And so, yeah, it definitely can make it a challenge for the defense.
Right. The not guilty 29 times will be an afterthought in history if there's one guilty. Renato Mariotti, duly noted. We appreciate your insight. Thank you. Happy Friday. Have a good weekend.